First of all, hi to everyone. Myself Prashant. So we are in the third chapter, salient features of the Indian Constitution, and this is the last part, that is part 2. So let's begin. Major amendments of the Indian Constitution. So what were the major amendments? So first comes this 7th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1956, right? So in this amendment there was abolition of existing classification of states, right? The classification was into 4 categories, that is Part A states, Part B states, Part C states, and Part D states, right? And they were reorganized into 14 states and 6 union territories. So you need to know 14 states after reorganization and 6 union territories. Before reorganization there were Part A states, Part B states, Part C states, and Part D states. The next point says that this act provided for establishment of common high court for 2 or more states. Needless to explain. Now the next statement or the point of this act says that there was appointment of additional and acting judges of High Court through this 7th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1956, right? Now let's discuss the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976. So this act is very important Constitutional Amendment Act. This act is important to extent that this act came to be known as mini constitution. So you can imagine the kind of changes made through this act, right? So that is why because of the huge changes, this act came to be known as mini constitution also, right? So through this act, socialist, secular, and integrity word were added in the preamble, right? Very important. Before 1976, socialist, secular, and integrity word were not there in the preamble, right? So this is important to know. This act also added fundamental duties. Before 1976, there was no fundamental duties in the Indian Constitution. So fundamental duty is in Part 4A of Indian Constitution, right? Article for fundamental duty is 51A. Very important. Now let's move to the next slide. This act also provided DPSP, Direct Principle of State Policy, precedence over fundamental rights. It should be E. Sorry for this. So directive principle of state policy precedence was given over fundamental rights. So basically it means that if there is conflict between a law which is with regard to directive principle of state policy, and there is conflict of this DPSP law with the law of fundamental rights, so in this case the precedence or directive principle of state policy will prevail, right? Fundamental right will go away. In this case, directive principle of state policy will be given preference. So basically this statement means what I said just now. And this act also said that any law with respect to directive principle of state policy is beyond the scope of judicial review or scrutiny. So here this statement is related to this point, DPSP precedence, right? It is related to this DPSP precedence. One second. It is related to this DPSP precedence statement as well. How is it related? So suppose there is conflict between directive principle of state policy law and fundamental right. So in that case, obviously, as the law says, directive principle of state policy will prevail, will be given preference, right? Directive principle of state policy law will be in effect and fundamental right will go away. So obviously here we are seeing the conflict. So court will will intervene on this matter, since fundamental right is going away here, right? So this law says that in this scenario judicial review will not be there, right? Directive principle of a state policy law will be in effect automatically. No scope of judicial review here. So this is what this statement says. Then this amendment act also brought power of parliament to be supreme in case of the amendment to the constitution. So here also we are seeing that this act is trying to abridge or is trying to reduce the power of judiciary, right? Here parliament is being made supreme, right? Basically it means that everything before parliament is subordinate to it, right? There is no scope of judicial review here, right? So this is what it means, but later these things were done away with, right? We will discuss that in later chapters. Now let's move to the next slide. So this point says that this amendment authorized Supreme Court for transfer of certain cases from one high court to another and redefined the writ jurisdiction of the high court. So needless to explain, writ jurisdiction, we know habeas corpus, right? Habeas corpus, quo warranto, and others. There is certiorari, then there is this prohibition. So here it is saying that there was redefinition of writ jurisdiction of the high court. Then this act also said that the center can deploy armed forces in any state to deal with the grave law and order situation. Needless to explain. Now this is a very important point. It says that president can make proclamation of emergency for any part of the country or to whole of India, and through this act this proclamation of emergency was this proclamation of emergency was made immune from judicial scrutiny, right? Judicial scrutiny, very important, scrutiny, right? Later on through 44th Amendment Act, this immunity in case of proclamation of emergency was removed, right? After 44th Amendment Act, judiciary can or could intervene in case of proclamation of emergency, right? So this is very important to know, right? Then this act made obligatory for the president to act on advice of the Council of Ministers. So it made obligatory for the president to act if advice was given by Council of Ministers, right, in case of proclamation of emergency, right? In the very first instance, we will see in 44th Amendment Act that here in first instance only it was obligatory for president to act, but in 44th Amendment Act we will see that president can move the proposal for reconsideration to Council of Ministers, right? And after again after reconsideration, Council of Ministers stays with the same decision, then this time president will have to act. But here in first instance only it is obligatory for president to act, right? 44th, reconsideration option was there, reconsideration option was there with the president, but not here in 42nd Amendment. Let's move to the next slide. So through this amendment tenure of Lok Sabha and the state assemblies. Pardon me for the wrong spelling. So a tenure of Lok Sabha and state assemblies was increased. Again, pardon me, it should be increased. Yeah, so was increased by 1 year, right? So it's clear. So here we are concluding this chapter, right? Salient features of Indian Constitution. Next I'll discuss in the next video. I'll discuss 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, which is very important. 44th Amendment Act, right? We will see how certain certain things which were there in 42nd Amendment Act were removed through 44th Amendment Act, right? So thank you for your time. I hope you really enjoyed and learned something from this video. So thank you again.